They called the millionaire crazy for adopting her, but she turned out to be a true genius. When the world collapses, it doesn't do so loudly or tragically, it happens coldly and deliberately. In that silence, a person is left alone. James Reynolds was a billionaire, a leader, the creator of a financial empire. But one day, he woke up not in a skyscraper, but in a modest apartment, with $1 in his pocket and no answer to the most important question: what is there to live for now? His name was James Reynolds, and just a year ago, that name commanded respect, envy, fear, and imitation. His company, Raintech Finance, managed assets worth more than most could even read aloud. But now, all of it had turned to dust. He sat in the peeling kitchen of his rented apartment, a mug of cheap instant coffee on the table, a piece of paper floating in it. Everything, including himself, looked tired and useless. It had been months since Victor Blackwood, his partner, co-founder, and supposed friend, smiled at him, then vanished the next day with billions, dragging Raintech into a controlled collapse. The phones went silent, the lawyers disappeared, the friends forgot him. The media made him a symbol of downfall. His name gave rise to the Reynolds syndrome, when blind trust in a partner ends in catastrophe. As always, it began from within. The algorithm managed by their Talon system, into which they had poured years of work, suddenly began to behave strangely. System failures, panic sell-offs, liquidity blackouts. Within days, Raintech ceased to exist as a functioning structure. And Victor vanished. That day, James left his house almost mechanically. It was cold outside, the air sharp against his skin. He knew he had just one bill left in his wallet, not to spend, but to remember. Everything had once started with $1, with an idea, with a dream. He stopped by the subway. Sitting nearby was a little girl, about 8 years old, with a piece of cardboard displaying a dozen paper cranes. Written in shaky letters on a box. Origami. 1 crane for $1. To help my grandma. He was about to walk past, but the girl's eyes, dark, fearless, with no trace of self-pity, stopped him. They weren't the eyes of a child, but of someone who had been through too much. How much for all of them? He asked. She blinked and shrugged. If you take them all, I can give them for $8. But my grandma doesn't like when I lower the price. James pulled out his last dollar. I only have one, but I can buy 1 crane and lunch. She thought for a moment, then nodded. They sat in a cheap cafe. The girl didn't ask for a menu, she already knew what she wanted. Buckwheat and a chicken cutlet. While she ate, James absent-mindedly stared out the window, until he noticed she was drawing non-stop on a napkin. When he looked closer, he froze. There were integrals, graphs, number sequences, and complex equations, all written with perfect logic and not a single error. Her handwriting was sharp, like that of a mathematician. What's your name? He asked. Sophia. You like math? I dream in it, she replied without looking up. When Grandma is in the hospital, I count. Counting brings order. It means things can still be fixed. He didn't know what to say. His mind, once capable of analyzing financial streams in real time, was now occupied with just one thought. This was no ordinary child. This was a miracle. A week later, Sophia was already living with him. He gathered his courage, contacted an old acquaintance, Margarita, a social worker, and told her the truth. He filed the paperwork and said clearly, I don't just want to take her in for now. I want her to stay with me. Margarita looked at him with doubt. His reputation was in ruins, he had no income, and the court wouldn't even listen. But then they saw them together. They saw how Sophia held his hand and protected him without asking for anything in return, and the court granted temporary custody. Sophia started at a regular school. In the first week, she corrected the math teacher. In the second, she won a city tournament. By the fourth, she was leading a club for older students. But in the evenings, when homework was done, she would sit at the laptop and play with numbers. Market data, graphs, algorithms. For her, it was a native language. One night, James woke up around 3 and found her at the desk, frowning at the screen. She turned to him and said, "You didn't fall. You were pushed. I have proof." At first, he didn't believe her. But when she showed him logs of anomalies and a strange, recurring cycle in the algorithm, one that couldn't have appeared by chance, he understood. Victor hadn't just betrayed him. He had planted a virus in the system that would destroy everything and transfer assets according to a pre-planned scheme. That was the beginning of a story no one saw coming. A story where a fallen billionaire and a girl with paper cranes decided to bring justice. Not out of revenge, but so that people like Victor Blackwood could no longer ruin lives with impunity. Sophia sat on the windowsill, chewing a pencil, a pile of papers, calculations, and diagrams behind her. James stood by the door, watching. He felt strange, at home, yet still a guest in his own life. The walls were the same. Peeling paint, the scent of old wood floors, muted lighting. But with her presence, those walls now held meaning. "I don't get it," she said, turning. "Why didn't anyone see this before? It's all right there in the logs, like an open book." "Because they looked with their eyes, not their minds," James replied. "Or because they didn't want to see." She nodded, as if she had always known. "Did you know that in most cases of financial collapse, there are unexplained algorithmic anomalies? They just sweep them under the rug." "Now I do," he answered with a smile. "Sophia, you do understand that you're special, don't you?" "I just don't get distracted," she shrugged. "I like thinking. My grandmother had a note on the fridge. The brain is the only thing that can't be taken away, if you develop it." The next day they went to school again. James held her hand, and for the first time in many months, he felt like he was heading somewhere. She didn't let go of his hand, even at the entrance, and in that moment, he realized, she was his family. Not by blood, but by choice. He returned home and, without hesitating this time, called Margarita again. She didn't answer right away. Her voice was dry. "I'm filing for official adoption," he said. "James," she paused. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure." The first court hearings were humiliating. The prosecutor questioned him harshly. "How do you plan to provide for her? You have no company, no property, not even a stable income. Wouldn't she be better off in a financially secure family? You know your reputation is currently under scrutiny." But Sophia interrupted. Not by request or permission, she just stood up and said, "If you send me to strangers, I'll run away and come back. He's not perfect, but he's my person. And that's more important than anything you can offer." The judge looked at her over his glasses, then at James, and wrote something down. An hour later, the decision was clear. Temporary guardianship extended, case forwarded for adoption review. "Do you know what you just did?" James asked her that evening as they ate macaroni and cheese. "Yes. I broke protocol. But I'm not sorry," she said, sprinkling dry basil over her food. "Why?" "Because when you were in court, your hand was clenched in a fist so no one would see your fear. And I know, if an adult is scared, it means they truly want something. I'm that something." He didn't reply. He just hugged her. She didn't resist. Sophia kept developing at incredible speed. Even the school principal eventually gave in, approving a custom learning plan. An invitation arrived from the university for a gifted children's program. Sophia declined. "I have a more important project," she said. "We need to figure out who stole your life." That evening, she was back at her laptop. James approached from behind. "What are you looking for?" "Algorithm behavior patterns," she replied. "I think Victor used a predictive fault mechanism." "What's that?" "An algorithm that doesn't just react to the market, it causes specific reactions in other algorithms. It's like a virus. It infects through behavior. At the right moment, it triggers a cascade of failures. And you can prove that? If we get access to the source code or the system logs. But we don't have them." He paused for a moment. "Maybe I know someone who might." "Who?" He hesitated. Sarah. My lead architect. She left 2 weeks before the collapse. Quietly. No drama. I think she suspected something. Sophia perked up. Then we need to talk to her. Right away. Contacting Sarah wasn't easy. Her phone numbers no longer worked, her email was silent. James took a risk and went to her old address, a quiet neighborhood with tall trees and green fences. He didn't expect to find her. But the door opened, and there she was. Still the same, composed, sharp-eyed, calm. James, she said evenly, I was waiting for you. You knew. I suspected. That's why I left. Do you still have the logs? Just copies. I'm not stupid. On Sophia's wall hung a map, but not of countries or cities. It was a map of connections. Lines between companies, funds, anonymous offshore accounts, digital intermediaries. It looked like a satellite image of a starry sky, but at the center there was a name in clear focus, Blackwood. Sophia traced it with her finger. Look, these 4 companies in the Cayman Islands. Officially unrelated, but they all share one investment structure. A trading system in northeastern Europe, registered in Latvia. Who founded it? A man named Gareth Stoltz, Blackwood's accountant. His name showed up in the final phase of your company's collapse. James listened silently. He was scared, but couldn't stop. You're sure this isn't just coincidence? A coincidence is too random event. When 7 data points match a timeline, that's a pattern. Sarah added, I checked your old terminal server. Remote access happened 2 days before the crash. The protocol was fake, but the coding style gave it away. It was Victor, or someone using his keys. They started putting the pieces together. Sarah hacked into old archives, found backups of transactions. Sophia analyzed them, building a web of dependencies. James compiled a legal dossier, documents that could become evidence. But they didn't yet know they were being watched. The suspicion came by chance. Sophia had left her notebook in the living room. Margarita, who had come for a routine check-in, opened it without permission. James saw her. She apologized quickly, brushing it off as a social reflex. But James sensed something was wrong. He used to play poker at the highest level, and he could tell when someone was bluffing. So he did what would once have seemed like paranoia. He checked her through his old channels. The information came back within a day. Margarita was not an official government employee. She was listed as an external consultant, working through a foundation tied to one of Blackwood's old partners. He immediately contacted Sarah and Sophia. We're being watched. Everything we say, everything we do. Most likely, she had access to everything we submitted to the court and to child services. Sophia nodded. Then we activate the backup plan. What plan? She smiled. The encryptor. I've already written the protocol. All data will automatically be duplicated in the cloud, disguised as archives of academic tests so no one suspects a thing. Even if they take our hardware, the information will keep going. And where will it go? To a dozen anonymous inboxes. One of them is my own channel on a scientific forum. If necessary, I'll publish everything as open source code. Sarah looked at her with respect. Girl, you don't belong in school. You need your own agency. Justice comes first, Sophia replied calmly. The next day, Margarita came again, wearing her usual smile and bringing a chocolate bar for Sophia. How are you, dear? Sophia accepted the chocolate and said softly, Thank you. But next time, bring a mandarin instead. Chocolate is bad for your teeth. It was a prearranged phrase, a signal. After Margarita left, they packed their bags. The evacuation plan was simple. James would stay in the city, continue life as usual, keep interacting with Margarita, and show that nothing was amiss. Sophia and Sarah would go to a safe place. Sarah's house outside the city, far from cell signals, cameras, or prying eyes. All files were encrypted, accessible only through special key phrases known only to Sophia. The final phase of the plan: prepare for public disclosure. They separated at the train station. James hugged Sophia. She was calm, too calm for a child. You'll come back, right? Only when you're ready to speak to the whole world. I already am. No. You'll be ready when you have the full truth. He nodded silently. For the first time in a long while, he felt trusted, without conditions, without safety net. A week later, James received a letter with no return address. Inside was a USB drive and a note. We're close. Just a little longer. Wait for the signal. He plugged the drive into his laptop. On the screen, code, complex like a living organism. At its center, the file name Phoenix version 1. Sophia. At an old farmhouse beyond the city, surrounded by overgrown fields and buzzing power lines, Sarah was setting up an antenna. Her fingers moved quickly and precisely. Sophia sat in the barn, surrounded by laptops, cables, and hard drives. Her face was lit by the dim glow of the screen, where lines of code flowed like a living stream. Perimeter is secure, Sarah said. Signal is blocked. Cameras covered. How's it going? Almost done. I created an algorithm that doesn't just replicate what Blackwood did. It reads it, analyzes it, and recreates the patterns in real time. We'll have an exact model of how he crashed the company and irrefutable mathematical proof. Will the court understand that? If not, I'll draw them pictures. Meanwhile, in the city, James continued to play his role. He started appearing again, at conferences, seminars, dinners with former financiers. He knew they were talking about him. Some out of pity, others out of curiosity. He didn't justify anything. He just listened and slowly began dropping information. We all know there was nothing natural about the fall of Raintech, he would say in whispers. Someone set the course. Someone bet on the collapse. He saw the tension in people's faces. Some nervously sipped whiskey, others turned away. A few days later, he got a call from someone in his old circle. If you want to live, James, stay quiet. This isn't the stock market. It's chess. Then let it be a game, he replied and hung up. Sophia had completed the prototype. It was a self-learning analytical algorithm capable of detecting irregularities in trading systems in real time, identifying deliberate manipulations, and exposing links between participants. It can be used as a shield, she said. If we publish it openly, it will be adopted worldwide. It'll become a standard. And then, even if someone tries to silence us, it'll be too late. That will cause an uproar, Sarah noted. Companies will lose billions if manipulation data starts surfacing. That's why we have to move quickly, Sophia replied. At the same time, they compiled Blackwood's dossier, more than 300 pages of documents, logs, transfer schemes, shell companies, and emails. They sent it through several anonymous channels, to journalists, regulators, and even a closed group of former Raintech employees who might have suffered from the fraud. The final step required distraction. James had an idea. Let them think I've found everyone and I'm ready to negotiate. He contacted the man who had called him earlier. I have the data. We can settle this quietly. Half the assets, and I disappear. A response came the next day. A meeting was arranged. A rooftop restaurant in a private club. The evening was warm, the breeze light. Blackwood arrived in a dark tailored suit, without bodyguards. His face was calm, almost indifferent. James, he said, I admit, you surprised me. I'm still alive. And I remember. So, what do you want, money? No. You make the offer. Blackwood looked him in the eyes. Half, through a chain of trusted funds, untraceable. In exchange, you walk away. And the girls too. James paused. Then he said, and what if I refuse? Then you'll disappear. Maybe not right away, maybe not literally, but you'll vanish and no one will remember. People like you don't survive. James smiled. I've already survived. You just didn't notice. He stood up and left. The next morning, Sophia's algorithm was published across all major scientific and financial platforms. It came with a manifesto. This code is not a weapon. It's a mirror. If you're afraid to look into it, then you need it the most. We're not calling for war. We're calling for honesty. The file spread around the world. Commentators, experts, investors, all began to talk. They tested it, launched it, and almost immediately, anomalies began to surface in different systems across various countries. At the same time, the dossier on Blackwood was handed over to the Securities Commission, the Financial Police, and 4 major independent news outlets. One of them, Voice of Capital, immediately published an exposé. Within days, Blackwood was arrested. His assets were frozen. Investigations began on a massive scale. Former Raintech employees who proved they had lost everything due to the conspiracy were given a chance at compensation. But more importantly, no one could hide who had created the algorithm. Sophia's name appeared everywhere, not as a genius but as a symbol. She was called the girl who stopped chaos. And though she hated the headlines, she knew the world had changed. When James returned home, she ran to him, just like that first day they had gone to eat buckwheat and cutlet. "We did it. We started something," he said. "The key is not to stop." 2 weeks after Victor Blackwood's arrest, the media was still buzzing, not just about the revelations but about a new sensation: the publication of an algorithm developed by an 11-year-old girl who had outsmarted entire teams of analysts. James Reynolds' reputation began to return, not as a powerful billionaire, but as a man who didn't break. He refused interviews. So did Sophia. The only exception was a small open lecture at a science club where they invited students, schoolchildren, and aspiring analysts. That evening, Sophia stood on stage in front of 100 eyes. "I'm not one for fancy speeches," she began. "But I want to say this honestly, I was lucky. I met someone who saw not a child, but a force. And I want there to be more stories like mine." She lifted her head. "That's why James and I are starting a foundation. It will help children who are in difficult situations but haven't given up. We'll search for those who can change the world, if given a chance. We're calling it simply, Phoenix." The room applauded, standing. Meanwhile, regulators launched new investigations. It was discovered that Blackwood and his partners had, for decades, used flawed algorithms not only to collapse competitors but to create panic on the markets. His arrest became a catalyst for reform in algorithmic trading regulations. The Securities Commission officially announced, "The algorithm created by Sophia is recommended as a mandatory risk assessment component for all major platforms." But for James, something else mattered more. He received an official letter. The court granted James Reynolds' petition to adopt Sofia Ivanovna Tarnova. The girl was now officially recognized as his daughter. The decision took effect immediately. He read the letter 3 times, then walked into her room. Sophia was focused on her tablet, studying the day's financial flows. "You've got 2 updates," she said without looking up. "You got the letter, and you couldn't resist reading it out loud." "Yes," he smiled. "You've officially become my daughter, not by law, but in truth." She nodded, stood up, and hugged him tightly, silently. It wasn't a childish impulse, it was a conscious, mature gesture. She had chosen him, just as he had chosen her. A month later, the Phoenix Foundation launched its work. The first program, scholarships for underprivileged children with high aptitude in math and analytics. The second, a course in ethics in digital finance where Sophia herself lectured. She still didn't fully know how to express emotion, but when kids came up to her after class, she lit up. "I never thought I'd teach," she told James. "But I think I like it." "That's because you're not just teaching," he said. "You're giving them hope." Sarah moved to Sweden. She declined a position at an international corporation and joined the project as a security advisor. The 3 of them, a former billionaire, a genius girl, and a software engineer, became the core of a new movement. Margarita was arrested. She refused to testify, but documents were found among her belongings linking her to a shadow fund managing information about Blackwood's asset. Her case became part of a broader investigation. One winter day, James stood at the window, watching the snow fall gently. Sophia came up and asked, "Do you miss your old life?" He thought for a moment. "No. Because back then, I had everything, except meaning. And now I have meaning. And that's something you can't buy." She nodded. "Then the formula works." "What formula?" "Justice, where the variables aren't money but people. Where the result isn't profit but consequence. Where victory isn't revenge but restoration." He smiled. "A complex formula," she said, "but the right one, like all things that are real."